Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Password Management for MSPs. We're introducing our JumpCloud Password Manager. So just a couple quick housekeeping things. So any questions you have at all at any time during this presentation, please put them in the questions panel. We do have time at the end for Q&A, but as we're going through, just throw them in, jot down any questions you have as we're going, and then obviously at the end, any questions that we may have missed, or if they are technical and use case specific, we will follow up afterwards and get you over into the right hands. So today's speakers, we have Antoine Jabara, so he's a co-founder and GM of MSP products here at JumpCloud, and we have Rob McGrath, a product manager here at JumpCloud as well. So without further ado, I know everyone's super excited to hear this presentation, so I'll kick it off to Antoine to begin.
Thank you, Dakota. Hi, everyone. So we're gonna go over the password problem, which is something that you all know, but then we're gonna move into the solution, which is single sign-on, talk about the limitations of the solution, then introduce the JumpCloud Password Manager, demo it, and talk about next steps. With that, let's start. So passwords are a problem. We all know this. 80% of data breaches involve weak and reused passwords. 40% plus of help desk tickets involve passwords. So passwords are a major source of frustration and productivity drain everywhere. The main reason for that is that we rely on users to create, manage, and remember passwords. And we as users in general aren't great at doing any of that. So we tend to reuse the same passwords or use weak variations of the same passwords. And that's not great because it makes things easier for hackers to compromise different types of resources. It also means that when we try to create strong passwords, we tend to forget them, and that leads to help desk tickets. So passwords are a big annoyance, and they need, like, ideally they wouldn't exist in the world, and there are many efforts that aim to try to eradicate passwords. One of the most successful and the most widespread is single sign-on, and that's something that's one of our areas of expertise here at JumpCloud. So single sign-on completely removes passwords for users. You just authenticate to the identity provider. That could be using a password or using a passwordless authentication mechanism. Once you're in, the authentication provider, which is JumpCloud in this case, authenticates you to any type of application or resource that supports single sign-on. That's great. Completely removes passwords. Users don't have to go through the process of creating, managing, and remembering passwords. You don't have password reset tickets for every single service. That's fantastic. The only problem, though, is that not all services support single sign-on. And that's a problem because when a service does not support single sign-on, then you have to revert back to using passwords, which means that users are back in the situation where they have to create, manage, and remember passwords, and they tend to reuse the same passwords or weak variations of the same passwords, which creates problems for both the users and you as a business. Now, in some specific scenarios, a business can really move away from using passwords completely and only use services that choose single sign-on. But even in these cases, shadow IT is a reality. So users will tend to use services that you are not aware of, and these services will need to be password-based because they're not enrolled in their single sign-on setup. So passwords are still going to be there. You're just not going to be as aware of them. So that limits your ability to control what's happening. This is why you still need password managers today. Passwords are on the way out, but it's going to take many years to get them completely out. In the meantime, passwords managers are going to be here to fill the gap. So that's the main use case of a password manager today in 2022. Fill the gaps when SSO is not available. Provide secure storage of passwords and other types of secrets. So you get rid of Excel sheets, secure notes, post-it notes, any type of insecure medium to store passwords. Password managers should provide you with a password generator that incentivizes and helps users create strong, unique, complex passwords when they sign up to new accounts or when they reset their password on a specific account. A password manager should enable secure sharing of credentials so that users can collaborate in a secure way and not send passwords over email, Slack, phone calls, etc. And password managers help provide you centralized management capabilities so that you can control the internal password manager that you use within your own business, but also the instances of the password manager that you're using across your companies or your clients' infrastructure. This is why password managers fit for purpose for MSPs need to be multi-tenant. They need to have centralized billing, centralized controls, and they need to be have centralized child company instances so that you can deploy the password manager to every single child company and manage them separately. Ideally, they'd have a single pane of glass that show you alert and reports in a centralized dashboard across organizations. But yeah, so that's the importance of password manager. This is why a password manager is still relevant today and is going to remain relevant in the coming years. So let's look at the different protection layers that you get if you have different combinations of single sign-on and password management. If you're not using single sign-on and not using password management, that's the worst thing that you could do right today. So you have no visibility and control over access across the organization. You're exposed to data breaches because employees are using weak and reused passwords, and you have no proper deprovisioning process for users because you don't really know what passwords users were exposed to in the past and what they currently have access to in a very clear way all the time. So if you're using single sign-on but not using a password manager, that's already a very good step. So you get partial visibility and control over access across the org, and you're still partially exposed to data breaches through the passwords that are still being used across the organization, and you have a partial deprovisioning flow. If you're using single sign-on, that's perfect. You just cut the user, it's a clear cut, they're out, but passwords that they still have access to, you don't have a lot of visibility over that. So you might have an idea that this person in marketing should have a Dropbox account, should have access to the Instagram account, which needs to be rotated, but over time, users tend to have access to more things, and there's again the idea of shadow IT and users having their own access to resources that you might not be aware of that they're accessing using passwords. Now, the best combination is obviously single sign-on with MFA and password management. That's going to provide you with full visibility and control over access across the organization, because single sign-on, you have clear visibility over that, and then the password manager should allow you to get an idea of what passwords are being used and shared across the organization. You have limited exposure to data breaches because users really need to get out of their way to avoid storing the passwords that they're using on the side in the password manager. If they do store them in a password manager, then security dashboards should show you weak, reused, compromised passwords. And that's gonna limit your exposure a lot to data breaches and also to data loss if someone leaves the company and they're the only person who have access to a specific service. And finally, you get complete and thorough deprovisioning of users. So you can cut off the single sign-on access, and then you can create a deprovision access to the password manager and generate a report to see which passwords users had access to over time. So that's by far the best combination. Password management should be used in 2022 to complement the gaps that single sign-on introduces, which is created by vendors that paywall single sign-on or don't support it altogether, which is not a great thing and is a thing that should change, in my opinion. For all of these reasons, we're introducing the JumpCloud Password Manager, right? So single sign-on has been our bread and butter for many years. One of the biggest requests that we've been getting is, when are you going to offer a password manager? So you do single sign-on, that's fantastic, but there are still gaps. Our users are still using passwords, and we don't have a lot of visibility and control over these passwords. You're forcing us to go to third-party password management vendors for password management. When are you going to introduce a password manager that complements your offering, fills the gap that single sign-on has to offer, and is centrally managed through the JumpCloud admin console? That's exactly what this does. The JumpCloud Password Manager fills the gap. So the user authenticates into JumpCloud. Once they're into their JumpCloud authenticated device, then they're logged in through single sign-on flows when services are set up and supported, and the password manager takes over and seamlessly logs users in for password-based accounts. For the users, all of this looks seamless. They just have one unified experience. They don't need to have a JumpCloud, another password manager, another MFA provider. All of this is supported through JumpCloud, and it's one seamless experience across the board. And it's something that you can deploy across every tenant. So if you have specific customers that need it, you could deploy it to just these customers. If you think that password management is a necessity that every single one of your customers should need, then you have also the ability to be able to deploy it at scale across your customer base. Now, these are the features that are part of the password manager at launch. we decided to start with to launch an offline password manager that stores the credentials on the devices, that acts as a hybrid between a fully offline password manager and a cloud-based password manager. That means that the credentials are going to be stored locally across your users' devices, but they're going to sync in an end-to-end encrypted way between the different devices and users that are part of the organization. For end users, the experience is the same. They just add a password, it syncs to any other device or user that needs to have access to it. In the back end, it's working in a decentralized way where there's an end-to-end encrypted communication stream happening. It's all seamless though. The password manager apps are available on all major platforms at launch. So we have an iOS app, an Android app for mobile support. We also have Windows, Mac, Linux apps for desktop support. And we have browser extensions for all major browsers, with Safari coming later this year. The password manager autofills passwords and 2FAs, but also credit card information and identities in the browser. And it also allows you to share passwords, 2FAs, and other types of secrets via shared folders. Your users can create the shared folders, they can add other users to it, and the passwords get shared in a seamless way. There's different permissioning levels that you can set up. Rob's going to walk us through a demo in a couple of minutes, and it's going to show us all of these details. The password manager has a strong and unique password generator to generate, obviously, strong and unique passwords whenever a user is signing up or resetting a specific account. There are password strength reports that are generated and shown to the users so they can take action and improve the password hygiene that they have in their current vault. It's obviously deeply integrated with the JumpCloud Open Directory platform, so the same user identity is the one that we use for single sign-on, MFA, device management, and now password management. So provisioning, deprovisioning, and running through user groups, and just gaining visibility over user actions and device actions as a whole is consolidated. It's really a unified experience that makes it much easier for you to be able to manage this aspect of the infrastructure of your business. There's centralized management of the password manager from within the JumpCloud admin console, where you already manage single sign-on, devices, MFA, and other types of features that JumpCloud has to offer. Finally, we have API support to control provisioning user access and deprovisioning user access to the password manager, and we'll expand on API support later in the year. So I've talked a lot about the features, the positioning, why it's important, how it works for MSPs at a high level, but I'll turn it over to Rob to walk you through a thorough demo of how the product works, and that should answer a lot of the questions that you might be starting to get now.
Thank you, Antoine. Nice to meet everybody here. My name is Rob McGrath. I'm actually a PM here at JumpCloud. I'm specifically on the MSP product team, and I'm here to show you guys how a password manager would help you guys at your MSP. So I'm gonna get that screen shared over here. So what you're seeing here now is the desktop app on Windows. Now this is cross-platform compatible, so it does work on Mac OS and Linux. The main difference is between all of them is going to be almost identical experience across all of them, with the exception of biometric authentication. So if you're on a Mac, it's going to use Touch ID, and on Windows, it's going to use Windows Hello. So what you're looking at here is one part, which is the desktop app. This is stored locally. It's very important to have on these devices to be able to store your data locally and use it for the browser extension. Later on, I'm going to show you the browser extension, but do know that there is a mobile app as well for Android and iOS and iPadOS. So you'll be able to have this on multiple devices wherever you may find yourself doing work. So this desktop app is broken into 3 different sections. So this left pane over here is really the navigation pane. This helps you get around to the different parts of the types of data that you would store inside of here. So clearly, the most important part would be your passwords. This middle pane over here is an actual list of items, so I can see passwords and the items that have been shared with me, either locally stored by myself or shared with me via a shared folder. And this right pane over here shows the actual content of that item. You have the option to save passwords. I can save credit cards as well. So I can use this for autofill, or if I don't want to, trust the intern or the new guy on the help desk to, go beyond just purchasing the one thing I gave him the credit card for, I can uniquely share it with him here. He can use it in a limited fashion, and I can revoke access as well. We also do have a secure notes section. Now, this is not like a documentation platform by any means, but this is really a nice place to kind of dump those random pieces of text that you don't want them sitting in a Word document just forever on your desktop, but you also don't want to put it in the cloud somewhere. This is a nice kind of in between. I personally would use this for things like answers to security questions that you always have to set up, especially those like different accounts that you have to have as recovery options. You can do this and share this with your team. Another option is for like license keys, install scripts, whatever else you want to dump here. I like to use this for that kind of random stuff. This also does have a baked in to a TOTP 2FA authenticator. So much like something like a Google Authenticator, you can copy and paste that secret. You can even attach it to a password. So for instance, if this one actually does have 2FA, but let's say like this one did, like I want to add 2FA here, you can simply do this, type in a secret, and once that's actually attached to it, forever that password and that item and that code will be saved together. So anybody who has access, either myself or an additional user, they'll have access to the TOTP code as well, which is a boon. I've worked in an MSP before. I know the general experience of yelling down the hallway for whoever has the authenticator or the phone number to receive the text for whatever account. This is a lot better and a lot less awkward and more COVID friendly to be able to do this remotely. Wherever they have access to their apps, they're able to pull up the TOTP code as well. And it does also autofill, which will show that with the browser extension demo. So these codes, as you can see, are cycling, so it is standard TOTP. We also allow you to save things like ID cards, passports, insurance information, whatever else. This is particularly handy for you not to have to go down your wallet or whatever. If you don't want to, again, give some random person in your office the driver's license, but let's say somebody's arranging travel or something like that, plenty of context to need that kind of information. This is a nice way to securely share that. And identities, really for things like address autofill. This helps you easily share billing or shipping addresses and kind of do this on the fly. All of those things I showed you now, they are capable of being either stored personally, which nobody else except for the user or like whoever is the person using this this app in particular, nobody else has visibility into those. However, if it is obviously with the password manager, one of the biggest features is sharing this with the rest of your team in a secure way. All these items are personal, but if I wanted to save this and share this with like my accounting department, for instance, I have the capability of adding items uniquely to this folder and granting access to that folder. So for instance, I have been set to being a folder man, like I can set this to be either folder manager, items manager, or folder member. Folder manager would be something like almost like a local admin for this folder. So they can add users, add, remove, or update, delete, update items inside this folder. And a folder member really is only able to get the password shared with them. I'm going to see if I can demote myself on my other device over here. And basically those, when you're a folder member, you can only use the password with autofill. So that means they can't reveal the password to themselves. They can't copy it. They can't paste it. They can't export. And they really just are able to only use it in the context of a browser extension. And with that, sorry, losing my voice today, sorry. And with all of that, you can also have this available on multiple devices. As Antoine had alluded to before, you can have another laptop, you can have a mobile device. All these apps will be able to sync where the data is stored locally. It'll do a peer-to-peer connection between the devices.
Rob gave us a heads up that he might need webinar. He has cough drops and like honey and a million things next to him, but it doesn't seem like it worked.
Is that back to school crud that kids give you? So slowly getting better. But all this is saying this data is all stored locally, and it's all fine and dandy for the desktop app, but clearly the most important feature for most people will be using the browser extension. So what I'm showing you here is available in all the major browsers, Firefox, all the Chromium versions, and also Safari when the desktop app comes out for general availability. So when I come in, the browser extension will be paired to my desktop app. It's going to show the same data as my desktop app as well, but it'll also have the password generator available, so I can pull up a password and create a password on the fly. I can also filter by folders, so if I have my personal folders or accounting options, whatever else, I'll be able to use those in autofill fashion for all the various accounts I have. This is fun, sorry. But with these options, I can even go in, pull up the item right here, and let's say, for instance, I want to log into my Squarespace account. There's built-in search. I can launch directly from here. And the username and password field has been detected automatically. Let me use that autofill, dropped in, and there I am. Now, if that password was only shared with me and I was not an admin or anything like that, That is the experience that an end user would have if they only have folder member access. It just blacks out the password, drops it in, and they never see it. Now, obviously, one of the most important features to have would be something like a TOTP code associated with it. For instance, like if I want to use a Monday.com account, oftentimes you guys, especially as admins, will have shared accounts amongst your team, or your customers will have shared accounts. And what they would want to do is they have that super powerful shared account, but you want to protect it with TOTP or 2FA. Problem is that's usually very painful. So a lot of times 2FA is not even enabled on these accounts. But in this context, you saw it autofilled, had a little window in the top right corner to let me copy and paste it if I needed to. But it was a very seamless just autofill kind of behavior with that. And oftentimes, especially when you're showing anything to MSPs, a very common question is, what about Office 365? We are compatible with Office 365 logins, especially those pesky global admin accounts you have to log into. And in this context, you can log in, click sign in. Thank goodness Microsoft pages take forever to load. So I can pull this up. It drops in the username. You'll also notice that the domain had changed. So I can actually have multiple domains, including portal.azure.com. Man, this is fun.
That's a severe cough. Basically, it autofilled the username, password, 2FA, and logged you in. And Office changed domains 3 times during that process. So what Rob was showing us is the ability to add multiple URLs to an item so that the item gets autofilled and like you're able to traverse these different domains and authenticate successfully without having the friction of needing to manually do anything. So that's, I guess, the second part of the demo where he showed, can you give me sharing folder access, Dakota, please? I'll take over. It seems like his cough got very severe. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's say that I want to now log into a new account here, and I don't have it stored in the password manager. First of all, that's how I unlock the password manager. I got a fingerprint prompt now. I just put it in, and it's just showing me my different accounts. I have multiple accounts here as an admin. I can use the input field as a filter. So if I type staging, for example, it's going to filter by the accounts that have staging. I can use my keyboard to go down this list and hit enter to have it autofilled. All of this is pretty seamless. If you want to hide this for any reason, you can just click on the password manager icon here, and that's it. It doesn't show up anymore. The way to get it to show back again is to click again on this. But let's say that there's an account that I don't have stored in there and I want to add it. So when I type the password manually, it's going to say add to JumpCloud. That's how users save their passwords. Click on that. It's going to show you the account. It's going to ask you to review the item. You pick which folder you want to add it to. By default, it's set to the personal folder, and that you hit save, and that's done. If you pick a shared folder, then the item gets automatically shared with different users. Now, in case if you're coming in from a different password manager, then we have an import capability. You launch our importer, hit next, pick which password manager you're coming from, and these password managers tend to export a file, a CSV file or a file branded in their own like specific extension. But then you pick the password manager, drop that file in, and then it seamlessly import all of the credentials into the vault. So the idea is that it's a password manager that you can deploy internally within your own organization through the child company that you're using internally to manage your own passwords, your admin IT accounts. You can share passwords, you can autofills, you can add passwords manually. There's even a mini version of the password manager that can autofill credentials in remote desktop sessions and in native desktop applications. It's also a password manager that you can deploy to your customers by going into their child companies in JumpCloud, activating a session, and then inviting the users to join through user groups. That's going to invite them to join the password manager. They sign in using their JumpCloud email address, and it activates their password manager on their account. You can manage all of that from the admin console, and yeah, you get basically full visibility and control over what's going on. With that, let's go back to the presentation. So this password manager, or the JumpCloud password manager for MSPs, is currently in early access. It will be released towards the end of October for general availability. If you're an existing partner and are interested in trying it out, starting to deploy it internally or to your customers, that's definitely possible. Reach out to your account manager if you know who that is. If you don't know who that is, email us at pwm@jumpcloud.com. That's PWM like password manager at jumpcloud.com. If you're a new partner who's interested to learn more about JumpCloud and specifically about JumpCloud Password Manager, just sign up at jumpcloud.com/sign up and go through the process, and you're going to be all set through that pass. So again, if you're interested in early access, let us know. We're going to show a poll on the screen now that's going to allow you to indicate whether you're interested or not. If you select that you're potentially interested, we'll make sure to follow up with you so you don't have to reach out to us and let us know. It's just the easiest way for us, for you to show interest and have someone from our end reach out to set you up with a demo account. So that's that. Let's give it a second to give you the time to autofill. I'm so used to talking about the password manager to fill that poll. 5 more seconds. Okay, perfect. With that, let's move on to Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And first question, I can answer that one. So will this be available as a recording? Yes, it is being recorded. We'll send out an email tomorrow with the recording link so that you can all access it and share it with your teams. Rob, this one's for you. Someone said to add bourbon into that with honey, I think it was. They said that should help with the cough.
That's a great idea. And after losing it and having to turn off a webcam on a live webinar, I might need some after this. Especially if it's recorded. Glad I get to see this in perpetuity. So
on YouTube.
Awesome. Looks like we have a couple of early access people in the program already, which is great. Great to see you on here. So here's a question. Scroll down. So can customers share their password with me and vice versa?
So at launch, customers won't be able to share passwords with you when your identity is as an admin. Now, if you sign up as a user within the child company, then obviously that becomes possible. But we do have a roadmap item to allow child companies to somehow be able to bubble up credentials to the admin's vaults.
Awesome. Where is the password data stored by JumpCloud?
So the vault is stored in a database locally on the device. The location where it is doesn't really matter because the encryption key is actually stored in the keychain or the secure storage unit of the device. And that gets unlocked once the user unlocks their machine. So the key becomes accessible, and then when the user authenticates to the password manager app through a fingerprint or a local PIN, then the decryption key is activated and it's used to decrypt the vault and show the information in the password management app. On iOS and Android, we also use the keychain or the secure storage unit of these devices.
I'm going to combine the next two. So what is the sync cadence? And then is there a delay on the sync?
It's instantaneous. So if the other device is currently online, they'll receive the sync within less than a second. If they're offline, obviously they'll receive the sync once they go online.
Awesome. Is the import ability limited to Chrome extension?
No, the importability is available on all browsers that we support, which are Chrome, Firefox, and all the Chromium-based browsers, which includes Brave and Opera. Safari support is going to get added later in the year.
Awesome. A couple of people saying it looks great. Looks like it works well. If a user is assigned SSO apps, will links to those apps show up in their password manager, or will they still need to go to their JumpCloud console?
That's a really good question. So not on day one, right? But we do have a plan to unify these experiences somehow. We're still trying to figure that out. What you could do, though, if you want to make it easier for your users, is go to the JumpCloud admin console and create bookmarks for accounts that you know exist across the organizations that use passwords. This way, the user goes into the user console, they'll find the SSO tiles in there, but they also see bookmarks for the accounts that are password-based. They click on that, takes them to the service, and then the password manager takes over. It's like a hack.
If I have TOTP and 1Password, will JumpCloud bring those over as well?
Yes, it should.
Perfect. Someone said I didn't see Passportal for importing. Was it there?
Passportal does support CSV exports, so importing is from our end doesn't really matter, right? As long as the CSV is available and it's not it's structured data, because we've seen some companies do it in an unstructured way, which has prompted us to create these password manager based instances which you saw. But if it's generic, it's just columns and they're respected, then we can import them. You might need to do some cleanup if the data is not super structured in there, but usually it is.
I can add to that real quick. The big thing we've seen also with exports and importing is if you have users that heavily use or overly use custom fields, you will definitely want to do you will definitely want to do some data cleanup ahead of time. So things that other password managers are kind of tricky when they export that way.
Someone asked if this is going to be integrated into the user console. I think we answered that a little bit earlier. And then if it's possible to deploy the app from the JumpCloud console.
That's a good question. So we just wrote commands that you can deploy through our commands module, that you can use through our command module to deploy, install, and run the app. We're testing them. If they work as expected, which they should, we'll make them available to you. So yes, you should be able to through our commands engine.
Invariably, users will commingle company passwords and personal passwords. How does JumpCloud's password manager handle it when that person leaves the company?
This is a pure enterprise password manager, right? We don't encourage users to store their personal accounts in there. So when the user leaves the company, there really isn't a big problem. Now, with that said, we are considering adding a personal offering at some point in the future. We don't know when that's going to happen or if it ever happens, but if we decide to go in this direction, then we'll figure out a way to detach the two vaults so that the user goes away with their personal accounts and keeps the enterprise accounts behind.
Awesome. We still have a number of questions, but if anyone has any extra, please feel free to throw them in there. If we can't get them to them now, we'll definitely follow up with you right after. How will backup of the database work if it's only stored locally?
So there's many ways for you to avoid data loss. The best way is to encourage users to install it on more than one device. Like most users today need to access company resources on their phones. So if they install it on the phone and computer, that's two different backups. The second one is through shared folders. So any item that needs to be accessible by more than one user, we would encourage users to store it in a shared folder so it gets accessed, it becomes available to these other users. In that case, if the user loses complete access to their vault and resigns up, then the shared folder members will sync that information back to them. Now, the third way is through encrypted backups. The password manager generates encrypted backup files, which are stored locally on the device. And we give you the ability to set the path of these encrypted backup files. The path could be set to a folder that's backed up to a cloud backup solution, for example, like OneDrive or Google Drive. In that case, you can restore the backup file. In the case of a data loss, you can restore the encrypted data file, backup file from there, and then the user resigns up, feeds that file in, and it restores their access. So many ways for you to restore backup in case a device gets lost.
All right. So is there any worst case scenario where this could be hacked or breached?
I mean, there's always, like anyone that claims that their solution is 100% hack-proof, it will never get hacked, is usually lying to you. With that said, we as JumpCloud are very thorough in releasing software. We go through security at the company level. We also engage third parties to do security updates, security audits on the infrastructure. The password manager is going to go through that type of audit. Also, the architecture in itself and the fact that the information is stored on the endpoints and synced between users helps, because you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket and then creating a single point of failure. The passwords really exist on the devices, and only sync events that are waiting for the other device to go online are on the servers. And these sync events are end-to-end encrypted. So the design in itself helps in mitigating the risk.
Can you specify the domain names and differentiate between 1.example.com and 2.example.com?
Yes, so you could, today what you can do is configure whether it works on exact domains or on all subdomains of a domain. You can set a specific subdomain and set the feature to autofill on only exact domains, which would make it work on this specific subdomain. So I believe that the answer is yes to your question.
Awesome. If a user is deleted, can the saved keys be transferred?
So any shared items are available on other devices. Things stored in their own personal vault cannot be automatically transferred. What you could do, though, if you really need to access a user's vault, is if you're setting the backup path of the encrypted folder to a cloud-based backup that you have access to, you could gain access to that encrypted backup, reset their JumpCloud password, impersonate them by activating the password manager using their email address, and then feed that backup file and restore the vault. It's complex, not complicated by default, because whether we want it or not, users tend to store their personal stuff in their vault. So they're gonna put their banking information, they're gonna put their Instagram account password. There's no way around it. So you could gain access to the vault, but it's not easy. We don't make it easy.
Awesome. Is this part of JumpCloud or an additional cost?
So if you're on JumpCloud for MSPs, it's going to be rolled out at no additional cost. If you're not on JumpCloud for MSPs, which is our new bundle offering for MSPs that allows you to scale and just deploy it to more of your customers, then it's an add-on that should be $3 per user per month. I would suggest, if you're interested about pricing, I would suggest that you talk to your partner account manager, and they're going to be able to give you more information.
Can you prevent a user from exporting passwords?
So you cannot prevent a user from exporting passwords that are in their personal vault, because they're the ones that put the password in the vault in the first place. So there's the assumption that they do know the passwords. But passwords shared with users where users haven't been given permission to be an admin on the folder or an item manager on the folder don't get exported. So these are these don't get exported.
Is there a password history feature for stored passwords / generated passwords?
So password history is a feature that we're going to reintroduce across all platforms after we launch in GA. So it's in the roadmap. It's going to get added in the future. It does exist on iOS and Android, but it does not exist yet in our desktop app. So it's going to specifically get introduced in our desktop app.
Awesome. Are saved passwords against any type of exposed password list? Can alerts be set up to warn admins of weak / reused / etc. passwords?
That's a good question. So there are multiple aspects to this. The first one is dark web monitoring is a feature that we're adding after launch. So we're already working on it. It's going to get added. With that said, weak, reused, and passwords that we know are compromised, like the top 10,000 most frequently used passwords, get displayed in the admin console. Now, JumpCloud has ticketing integrations with PSA vendors. And what we're planning to do is tie these alerts with the ticketing integrations. So when a user when a compromised password shows up in a user's vault, that could trigger a ticket or send an email. So there is a roadmap item to do that. At launch, you're going to be able to see weak, reused, and compromised passwords. We're going to add, after launch, the ability to see passwords that were leaked on the dark web. And at the same time, we'll be looking at tying these alerts that are within JumpCloud to the ticketing integrations that we have.
Awesome. I know we are just about at time, and some of these questions are a little use case specific, so we'll definitely reach out to you to answer those at the end. But Antoine, Rob, do you have any parting thoughts before we sign off here?
No, thank you very much. And yeah, Rob, feel better. This stuff is...
Yep. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, audience out there on the web. And thank you for not putting on TikTok.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you everyone for attending. I see a couple questions coming in, so we'll definitely reach out to you afterwards. We do have a short poll at the end, just a couple 3-question poll. Let us know how we did, what you want to see next, and how we can improve to make these better for you. So with that, appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.